Have you ever wondered how educators and community members can support immigrant families, undocumented youth, and individuals with DACA? That's exactly what this podcast is going to explore. Join us to learn more about these topics, listen to our guest stories, and explore resources to support students and their family. I'm your host, Dr. Gerardo Mancilla. I immigrated to the United States at a young age and am currently working as an associate professor of education. This is the Educators and Immigration Podcast. Hello and welcome to another episode of Educators and Immigration. I'm your host, Dr. Gerardo Mancilla. I'm very excited about having Diego on the show today. He is one of the guests that I was trying to work with as I was developing the podcast. I wanted to have him as a guest, so I'm very excited that he's able to join us today for this episode. And so just to give you a little background of Diego, Diego Corzo is the Forbes-featured millennial real estate entrepreneur, investor, mentor, and TEDx speaker. He was born in Lima, Peru, and moved to the United States when he was 9 years old. Diego graduated top 1% of his class from Florida State University with 2 bachelor's degrees. The first bachelor's degree focused on information technology, and his second bachelor's degree focused on management information systems. Both of these degrees he finished with less than 4 years. He then joined corporate America for a while and left to pursue his passion in real estate. Currently, he's a realtor for Keller Williams. Diego is on his path to financial freedom and aspires to help others, especially millennials, to become financial free and reach their full potential. Diego, as I mentioned in the intro, I'm very excited to have you on the podcast. How are you doing today?
Gerardo, I am very, very happy to be here and excited to be able to share my story and also give a little bit of insight on my life, on the immigration process. It has been a roller coaster, right? But always on the path of my own version of my American dream. I like to share that part of the story.
Perfect. So why don't we start with having you share a little bit about your story? Again, just whatever you feel comfortable. And then we'll start with the story and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the...
Yeah, for sure. So basically, as you mentioned, I came here to the United States when I was 9 years old. And we came to the United States from Peru with a visa, with a tourist visa. And then we overstayed it. And that's when we became undocumented. We moved into my aunt's house and we slept in a bunk bed, my parents, my brother, and I, for about 3 or 4 months before we found our own space. So it was one of those things of like starting from scratch, how to get a car and all of that. But it was a journey and lots of ups and downs. And as a kid, I didn't really know what it meant to be undocumented until I turned 15 years old. When I was going through school, all my friends were getting their driver's license. So I go to the DMV. And what was interesting is I go there with my mom, give them the documents that I thought were required, and say, yeah, everything is good, but we need this document. So I asked my mom, and she was like, no, we don't have that. So I wasn't able to get my driver's license. And that's when I knew that my life was going to be different than my friends. So I put all my emphasis into school, graduated third in my high school class, got into Florida State University. And as I was going to Florida State, like entering, I found out that I couldn't qualify for student loans or financial aid because I don't have a citizenship, I don't have a green card, no visa, no nothing. So that was another obstacle. But I was able to go to Florida State for one semester due to the fact that I was able to save some money. My parents were able to help me, and I did get 1 or 2 scholarships that would allow me to get them, but based on more scholar style. They didn't require those specific documents. So that was very helpful. As I was going through that process, I get an internship working for free, and that company wanted to hire me later. And I was like, great, this is awesome. I was going through the hiring process, and man, they're like, Diego, everything is good. We just need your work authorization. I was like, cool. I called my mom, and I'm like, Mom, we need this. And she's like, hijito, we don't have that. And I was like, okay, so I'm 19 years old. I cannot work now. I cannot drive. I can't get student loans or financial aid. And I'm like, holy crap, like, what the heck? Like, everybody told me to just focus on your schools and things will work out. Just work on that. And I was hitting all of these obstacles. But I remember that what my dad told me, that the U.S. is the land of opportunity, but it is up to us to find it, right? So I was able to find a way to create my own company and then I would be able to get hired as a contractor by people paying my company, and then I pay myself, right? I was able to live through that income. So I was riding my bike to and from different businesses so that I could build their websites. And man, it was like hot summer heat summers, but I was able to make it happen. Graduated college. That's when the DACA program got started. And I was about to graduate college, and I was like, what the heck am I going to do? Like, I was going to move back with my parents or something and then see what I was going to do on the website world. But DACA came, and that's the same semester that I was graduating. So I started to apply for jobs, and General Motors was one of the employers over there. And so I got hired right on the spot, and they told me, do you want to go to Detroit or Austin? And I was like, I don't like the snow. So I chose Austin. So I moved to Austin in 2013 and worked in General Motors till 2015. From there, I got my realtor's license because I wanted to invest in real estate. I wanted to learn more about the real estate market. That was one of my goals. So I decided to go into real estate full time. And now, fast forward from 2015 till now, 2022, I have a team of 10 agents. We are the number one team in our Keller Williams office here in Austin. Last year, we sold around 256 homes.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, man, it's been crazy being able to work with an amazing team. And then as a real estate investor, I also own around 60 rental properties, 61 doors.
Wow.
And there's a lot more challenges that came through that by being able to go through all of that part. And with DACA, with everything that went on. And now I also have a few other things that I do in helping other people become financially free, because now I teach them, I coach them because, and I'll share this. And then, so we're recording this September 7th.
Mm-hmm.
And I was scrolling through my Facebook today, and I was like, oh my gosh, this was the time in 2017 when the Trump administration tried to take away DACA.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And part of my story of why I share it is because of what happened. It was September 6th, right, 2017, when the Trump administration tried to terminate DACA. And I was like, holy crap, like, why is this happening, right? Because of the fact that I was going through everything. I was 26 years old at the time, 27. And I was like, okay, this is another obstacle, right? Because life as immigrants, especially with DACA or undocumented too, there's been like a lot of ups and downs with the Trump administration. So this was like the one thing that I was like, Jeff Sessions said that DACA denied jobs for hundreds of thousands of Americans by allowing those same jobs to go to illegal aliens. Mm-hmm. Those were the exact words. And I was like, I read that and I was like, heck no. Yeah. I earned my jobs. I earned the opportunity to be a leader and hire employees. I earned so much for General Motors to hire me on the spot. So I was pissed. I asked my mom for permission first, though, because I was like, I'm going to go on social media and I don't know where this is going, but I need to share my story. Yeah. And I shared a picture of the taxes that I paid as a 26-year-old of over $28,000. And that post went viral, right? And I'm sharing this story because it's like the 5-year anniversary of that post that I did. Yeah. And that's the post that got the attention of the virality of the DACA dreamer story, because of the fact that I'm a big believer that life happens for us, right? And instead of me becoming that victim, like, oh my gosh, here he goes again, and like my life is going to be awful if they terminate DACA because we didn't know what was going to happen. I was like, okay, why is this happening for me? No matter what happens in our situations and in my life, I've always asked myself those questions, right? Because if you ask yourself, why is this happening to me? You take the victim mentality. But if you ask yourself, why is this happening for me? Then you can take the empowered mentality. And that's what I did. And so I share my story on social media. It goes a little bit viral, nothing crazy, but it got me on Fox News Austin that weekend. And then it got the attention of an organization called Forward.us. Okay. And they flew me out a month later to Washington, D.C. to meet with congressmen, share my story, featured on Entrepreneur.com, Forbes, all of that stuff, because it was such a hot topic. And me sharing my taxes, like that I'm paying taxes when people think that undocumented immigrants don't pay taxes. I'm like, look, I'm 26 years old and I'm paying in taxes what some people make in a year. And you're telling me that I'm stealing jobs from Americans. I'm like, come on.
Yeah.
By that time, I also owned a property. So I was doing a lot more than what Americans do on the, you can say, on the economic side to provide to the community and stuff like that. But that was a post that got me the stage, I would say, to be able to share my story. And so many people identified with that story, both DACA recipients and some of my American friends that were like, holy crap, Diego, I did not know that. And the other one that was like, holy crap, Diego, I am a lazy American. And with you doing all of this, not being able to work or drive until 22 years old, and then by 26 doing what you have done, is like crazy. But yeah, that's a little bit about me. I know I shared a lot.
No, and thank you so much for sharing that information because as you mentioned, there's so many different like chapters and different parts to our stories, and each of those can be unpacked so much further. So going off the last statement that you mentioned with the taxes, usually what happens is if somebody's undocumented, they could still apply for an ITIN number, individualized tax identification number. And so that's usually how they actually have to pay the taxes. So nobody is exempt from paying those taxes.
Yeah,
What happens is that the families then apply for the ITIN number, and then that's how then when they do their file their taxes, they're able to get back some of that, but a lot of times they don't get the full amount or the full credits or the full refund from the government as well. And as you mentioned, many of us pay those taxes, and a lot of times, depending on the tax bracket, there's also a lot of taxes that the government also keeps as well because the people are not able to claim those back. And so I appreciate you kind of sharing that part of your story because that is one of the myths that undocumented people don't pay any taxes. And I remember seeing, as you mentioned, several people sharing their taxes and saying like, "No, I'll show you exactly how much I pay."
yeah. And that's what I did. I shared exactly how much I paid, and I was like, "Look," and this is just one part of it. And now, fast forward years later, I pay even like 5 times that a year, and it goes to show that hey, we do provide to the community. We do provide to this country. We are an asset to this country, and that's what I was trying to prove as I share my story. Is that we're not here to like be a burden to the United States. We're here to be an asset
Yeah.
to the United States.
And I think that's the other part that DACA has also highlighted. Like once people have been able to apply for DACA and obtain DACA, then they're able to also increase their hourly wage. They're able to buy their first house. They're able to buy their first car. They're able to actually take out like other loans to be able to help them with that too. And I appreciated also the conversation about the economic impact that immigrants have on this country, because oftentimes, as you mentioned, it goes invisible or it's not acknowledged. And so it's important to bring that up and think about those opportunities too. As you mentioned, you created your own job description. You created your own like pathway. You created your own job that the companies needed. And that was one way of being able to highlight that aspect of it. You also mentioned DACA going up and down in terms of we've been in limbo for so many years. It was introduced in 2012. And since then, we're in 2022, 10 years later, there's still a lot of things happening in the news. The most recent was Biden's notice. They didn't change much about the process itself, but currently, as it stands, there's no new applications. But one of the things that is still allowed is the advanced parole. So if somebody has that guy, then they could do advanced parole to be able to travel for work, for education, or for humanitarian purposes as well. And as we speak, there's also a court case that DACA is pending. So again, it's still in limbo even today. And so I think that that's something crucial to be able to address. That notion that DACA, while it's great and it's supporting a lot of people, we still need that permanent solution as well to be able to create a pathway. In your story, you also share this idea of kind of building your own LLC or your own small business. And one of the things that I think is not as well known still, I think that more people are talking about it. But I mentioned you could apply for your ITIN and you still pay taxes. Can you talk to us a little bit more about this process of what was it like to think about yourself as a worker and then think about yourself as an owner of a company that you're basically building from the ground up?
Yeah. So at the end of the day, it's interesting that the country, right, didn't wanted me to pay taxes as a employee, but they will happily let me pay taxes as a business owner. They're like, oh, sure. Well, you cannot work and pay taxes here, but in this quadrant, you can. So the process was creating an LLC for it using an ITIN number, or you can use a social, or you can use whatever one might have, so that you can create an EIN number, which is the taxes for the business, right? So you can get your ITIN to use that to create your EIN. And then that you're getting paid as a contractor because other companies are going to hire your company to be able to provide a service. So then what you can do with that is you have expenses that you run through the business and all of that part, and then you can pay yourself, right? As either distributions or earnings, whatever, and you pay taxes based on that as if you were self-employed. Unless you do other stuff like an S corp, but that's more complicated. But at the end of the day, you have your LLC. So, for example, instead of paying Diego Corzo back in the day, they will pay Punt Consulting LLC because that was the name that I decided to name the company. Now, one thing that I did too to make it easier, because you can do it that way, the credit, a lot of the credit of the help that I've gotten has been from one of my best friends, Pascal Wagner. He was the one that actually started the company for me too. And then he added me as a second owner later. And that was the only way. And I was like, hey, I'm going to make money and we're going to have to pay taxes from it. And just to make you aware, but this is the only way. He's like, dude, I'll help you. So yeah, I've gotten a lot of help from Pascal Wagner. He's one of my best friends from high school. He gave me rides from like 2007 to 2012 till I got DACA, till I got my license. He was giving me rides everywhere, right? But it goes to show that there's nobody, right, that's self-made. There's always been people that help you, whether it's family, friends that help you throughout your journey, and really grateful for all those people.
Thank you for sharing that. You mentioned the term LLC. And so LLC stands for Limited Liability Company.
Mhm.
You mentioned the ITIN, which I kind of talked about, the individualized tax identification number. And then there was the EIN, which is the employment identification number as well. And again, these are all terminology for in terms of developing your own company, but also the tax purposes as well. One of the questions that I'm having is, have you noticed or have you been able to explore if there's a difference requirements of starting a business, let's say in Texas versus Florida? I'm currently in Wisconsin. So thinking about, are there different requirements if I wanted to start my own business in terms of using the ITIN number?
I don't think so. It will just be how you set it up. Like if you're creating a business for products and stuff like that, there's definitely different things that you have to do for like sales tax and all this other stuff. But if it's more like a service that you're rendering, that you're providing, then it makes it easier.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one of the other conversations that has been coming up is this idea of entrepreneurship and thinking about the Latino community, how there's been entrepreneurship has been part of the community as well.
Hmm.
And so thinking about, oftentimes I think about people like painting houses or doing like roofing or doing siding for the houses too, or cleaning services too.
Hmm.
And I think that as we think about what does it look like to start your own business, it could be any of these areas where you could think about any kind of service that you could provide can become a business that, as you mentioned, then you get contracted, which is a 1099. And so instead of getting paid through a W 2, which is your employment, then you would get paid through the 1099 then to be able to move forward that way. Have you had any experiences in terms of supporting other immigrant or undocumented communities and starting their own businesses in the same way or not yet?
If I have helped them
Yeah.
get started,
Or know of other situations where?
it has been more on in providing them the right some of the resources. One of the websites that people can go to is inkfile.com. They can go there, they can choose. There's like four different programs or something that they can choose. And I would say get the package that has the EIN number just to make it easier. You choose the state, you choose how you want to file, and they do everything for you, which is pretty good. So that's one of the things where I have helped more people has been in helping them buy their first home. That's been more my area of expertise rather than helping them create a business, just because I make them aware that they can qualify for low down payment programs. Like they can get into a home by putting 3 to 5% down, and that's how they can buy their home, right, as part of the American dream. They think that, oh, because they have DACA, that they're not going to be able to qualify, but they do. So that's one of the things that I share a lot more with the right resources, with the right lender that can lend in like 48 different states. I pair them up with DACA friendly realtors because that's really important to make sure that you're working with the right team, because there's a lot of lenders and a lot of realtors that have no idea what DACA means, that have no idea that it's like, wait, you're here with a work authorization, but you're not here without a visa. So you want to work with people that actually know the program. And that's what I've been able to do with dreamers all over the US.
Awesome. And thank you for sharing that resource because I think that that has been another conversation about home ownership and thinking about how to get a loan when we think about the big banks and conventional loans versus other projects or other programs that might be able to do loan money across different states. And you mentioned thinking about some that might offer up to 48 different states that are available too. So thank you for sharing that. I'm wondering if we could talk a little bit more about you got your passion into real estate
Yes.
and you created your own team, Restify. And so, can you tell us a little bit about what that process was? And you mentioned creating opportunities and employment for others to then be able to be hired under your team as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey?
Oh, for sure, for sure. So, two things came out of that, right? So, I am a realtor. That's what I do, as you can say, like my job, like my everyday thing. With that, we are under a real estate team in Keller Williams. So, there's about 10 agents. First, it got started with two of us. And from there, as we started working, we attracted agents that had the same mindset and everything of like investing, wanting to have financial freedom, what are hustlers, like willing to put in the work. So we started a team, and now we have three admins, we have 10 agents, and it has been an incredible journey in being able to provide for them. And we've helped, like I mentioned, last year we sold around 256 homes. So that has been awesome. A lot of those people have been what I call house hackers, right? Which it's a term that was made by some people that are real estate investors. But it's funny because our immigrant parents and like family have been house hacking for years, right? Which is like you buy a house, you live in the master while you can rent out the other rooms, and you can make income from that, right? The house, your tenants, your roommates can pay for your house while you're living for free. So that's been part of my story, was that I bought a home in 2014, putting 5% down. So with less than $10,000, I was able to buy a house, live with three roommates, and then paying for my house. So since 24 years old, I've been living for free. And that helps financially in a huge way because I was able to save almost everything else that came from my income from my job, for example, at GM while I was working for General Motors. That is what helped me be able to have more extra money to continue investing, right? And then my story got featured on Bigger Pockets, which is the largest real estate podcast. And that caused a little bit of my story again to go viral. And that happened. Then I started working with another Latino guy. His name is Felipe Mejia. And because he was featured before me, and when we had so many people asking us questions about, hey, how did you do it as a millennial? I want to do what you're doing. I want to get started. So many people came out of me like, holy crap, you're the first DACA recipient that I heard in Bigger Pockets. So then that's when we created Rat Race 2FI, which is Rat Race, helping people get out of the rat race for financial independence. And that's where we share our journey of how to get financial freedom, financial independence, and so forth.
And so I don't know if we've talked about financial independence as much in this podcast yet. I know I've listened to a lot of podcasts that talk about it,
Yeah,
but the idea of financial independence or financial freedom is that you have enough accumulated or enough income sources that kind of help support your cost of living. And so there's many different sources that people can have. And so real estate is one of the sources where, as you mentioned, rental income then becomes one way of sustaining one possible income. Oftentimes we think about a W 2 or your workplace as being your main source of income. But then as we think about entrepreneurship, there could be other side gigs or side hustles that people do to try to get more income. And so the idea with financial independence, and correct me if I'm wrong, but is that you're trying to get as much support or as much leverage in terms of how much money is coming in and from what different sources. And depending on kind of like who you follow, there's a certain percentage that you want to try to have to be able to have the income cover all of your expenses. When you reach that threshold, then that's usually when you are at financial freedom or financial independence.
exactly.
Did I miss other things?
No, no, no. This is great. This is great. The main thing too for anybody that wants to understand the mindset, right, that I have and that I teach comes from the book Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, right? Which means that there's a difference between active income and passive income. Is passive income is income that you make while you sleep. Active income is while you're working, right? So there's two ways for people to make money. You can either trade your time for money, or you can make your money work for you. So I read that book when I was 20, 21 years old, and I was like, holy crap, this book changed my mindset. And I was like, my goal is to have 10 properties by age 35. Like that was my goal. I was like, that's all I'm going to do. But from the perspective of I needed to be able to save my money. So I got a job trading my time for money, of course. And then I would reduce my living expenses by living for free, right? But I live frugally, saving as much as I could because I had the mindset that I needed to invest. And then those assets, the houses that I would buy, those rental properties, will then pay for my lifestyle, right? I heard a quote in one of my first events that I went to. He said, build a bigger life, not a bigger lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And so for me, building a bigger life meant more experiences, travel rather than just things. So from that perspective, I was very smart with my money and not getting the nicest sofas or whatever, right? I was living with roommates while making $5,000 at GM a month. And my coworkers were like, why are you living with roommates? I was like, well, because my goal is to leave corporate America in the next few years and be able to make money in other ways and then live off my rentals later into the future. And I was able to achieve that goal. Instead of at age 35, I achieved it by 28. And then from there, it was just more and more and more. And now I'm around 60 doors, which super blessed, right? Because it has given me an opportunity for financial freedom and then to do what I want to do at the end of the day. And that's why when you shared my intro, it was I like to help people achieve financial freedom and their true potential, right? Because I feel like once you make money irrelevant, once you make money like you don't need money to work, you get to really begin doing what you are most fulfilled. Then you're not having to go to work, you get to go to work. And that is an amazing thing. And that's why I like to teach other people to give them that level that no matter where you come from, right? Like to go from not being able to work or drive undocumented, hearing so many no's from lenders in the beginning, like, what is DACA? How are you here? Blah, 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 to now building what I've been able to build. That's where I like to give back. Because again, I was mentored by really amazing people that gave me an opportunity where they shouldn't have. I was able to surround myself with successful entrepreneurs. You needed to be at a certain level. You needed to be a millionaire to be able to go into these groups. And I found my way in when my net worth was $25,000. And they were like, who the heck is this kid? Why are you here? And they mentored me. And now, fast forward years later, I've been able to now get what they taught me to now teach to others.
Yeah. Giving back is one of the things that I keep on hearing about your story. So I was able to benefit. So therefore, now I'm trying to give it back and be able to explain this to others and help others and understanding even the complexity of the terminology that we just talked about.
Yeah.
You mentioned Robert's book, and that one's actually in Spanish as well. So I
Yes.
just wanted to mention that because I've read it in English as well, but I recently found it in Spanish. So if people are listening and they want to check it out or they want to share that with a family or friend, that one's available in Spanish as well. And Rich Dad Poor Dad is the title of that book.
Yeah.
And so we were talking about you kind of being able to give back and having different ways of supporting and teaching others. Can you talk a little bit about some of the ways that you're currently engaged in either teaching this? You have your real estate team that you work with directly, but then you also have other services or other ways that you support the community in general. Can you talk about some of those other ways?
Yeah, for sure. So one of them is through Rat Race to FI. That's the thing that I do to teach others how to get financial freedom. We have calls every single week. We have a community on Slack where investors are talking every single day, basically, and giving them the right accountability and giving them empowerment to be able to invest where they might hear so many no's even within their own family, because sometimes we don't know what we don't know, right? And if we listen to people that may have goals, but maybe they didn't have the right resources or they gave up on their goals, if we're surrounding yourself with like minded people, then you're going to be able to take action, right? So that's what I provide. So for anybody, they can go to radrace2fi.com and they can check out what that community that we have that we've been able to build.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing that resource because I feel like part of it is also, as we mentioned, the different opportunities, the different learning that can happen
Yes.
to be able to have those resources for people to go and check out. So, as we think about going back to this idea of undocumented and students with DACA, As you think back about this conversation of kind of where you started and kind of where we are now, are there other resources that you think would be helpful to kind of mention in terms as we think about people going through their educational journey? You mentioned real estate is one possible pathway, but the LLC can be for anybody at that point. Are there other things that we haven't mentioned yet that you think are important advice that you would have for undocumented students or students with DACA?
For undocumented students, let's say that they cannot get a job, right? Entrepreneurship is one of the things that you get paid by the value that you bring to the marketplace. This is something that Jim Rohn used to say. You get paid the value that you bring to the marketplace by solving a problem. So if you can solve a problem for people that people can pay monthly, that people can pay, like you set them up on recurring revenue, you create a product or some kind of value, you will get paid very well. Now you have to go from that perspective. You have to solve a problem. So just because you're graduating college and you're like, holy crap, like I'm getting a computer science degree or a degree in marketing or whatever, you can use your skills to render a service that if you provide, like if you can take more the entrepreneur route and you provide for people because you're solving a problem, depending on how complex that problem is, you can get paid very well. So I would say don't give up to those people, especially the dreamers that technically that are dreamers but cannot apply for DACA or anything like that. To not give up, but to have that curiosity, right? That resourcefulness, because that is a skill that most Americans don't have because they didn't have to be resourceful. They've had everything all the time, right? Where with us, when you start from zero, you have to get resourceful. That's why when somebody gives me a task, like they were like, holy Diego, like you always figure it out. And I was like, yes, because there's always a way. So a couple of years ago, I shared my story at FSU and I've shared it on a TEDx talk in Mountain View College in Dallas. And on the TEDx talk, I shared that I have the mindset that if the door of opportunity is closed, I go through the window, right? And we as immigrants, we have that mentality like, hey, échale ganas, no matter what, we always make it happen.
Yes.
So for the DACA recipients, for the dreamers, for anybody that's undocumented, we know that there's always a way. We just have to work a little bit harder.
Yeah.
And that's been something that my parents ingrained in me. Is like, look, you can have whatever you want here in the United States, but just know that it's going to be harder than your friends. And so when those things did happen, when my friends could get student loans and I had to work my way through college, it was just the cards that I was dealt, but doing it from the perspective that fast forward years later, my friends are in debt $60,000 for going to college and I'm not. And so I was able to buy those real estate properties, right? So it was a blessing in disguise.
Yeah.
So again, why is this life happening for you rather than to you? When you have that mindset, you begin to think of a little bit different of like, look, this is actually a good thing that maybe this has happened. But you see it when you connect the dots years later. I'll tell you that. Because while you're going through it, it is a little bit hard. But then I always go back, especially as dreamers, like our parents did have it harder, right? And there's a podcast by Charro Azteca who says like our parents didn't come this far so that we could get this far,
Yeah.
right? And the idea is that there's so much more that we can do, that we should do, and we just need to put in the work. There's nobody's going to give it to us, right? There's nobody. We just need to put in the work because we know that it's that we can make it happen no matter what to achieve our version of the American dream.
Thank you. And I agree 100% with you in terms of thinking about what are the different pathways and opportunities that can be brought forward. And the path might not look the same for all of us, but it might be different as we kind of move through it. One of the last questions that I have is, are there other conversations that we haven't talked about that you think are important? I mean, you just kind of laid out this path of opportunities and different pathways.
Mhm.
Are there other things that, as you think about the DACA movement, there were some people that were fortunate enough to be able to qualify for DACA. Unfortunately, no new applications are being accepted right now.
Mhm.
And so we do have a population of undocumented students as well, as you mentioned, dreamers. Are there other conversations that you think are missing from the conversation in terms of how to support them as they go through their educational pathway
Yeah.
or their career pathway?
With their career pathway, I would say, look, if you know how to sell, and this is not an advice that I was given as advice years ago, this is something that I learned as I progressed through my journey, is if you know how to sell a product, if you know how to sell something, you will get rewarded. So having sales skills gives you the opportunity to have unlimited income if you have the right product that you can sell. And that's why as a realtor, I can sell a lot of homes and make a lot of money,
Yeah.
right? Like it all depends too on that mindset that you have, right? Because I have the mindset that we're helping families. I'm not just making money.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm helping families buy their dream home. Like that is freaking awesome. Or I'm helping investors create financial freedom. But if people learn how to sell, having that skill, I feel like that would help people so much in the years to come that in the beginning, you don't think about it, that it's such a valuable skill. But later, I mean, you're always trying to sell yourself, right? I mean, if you're on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
everything, there's so many different applicants for jobs or for services. If you know how to sell yourself, if you're a good salesperson, you can get paid very well by having that skill and helping other people solve a problem, right? So I would just share that mindset, that skill, no matter what their major is, what they're studying, whatever, if you learn how to sell, you're going to be successful.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for all that advice. I feel like it's very helpful to be able to not only for our students to hear it, but also our educators to kind of hear this idea of how do we also help create and guide those different pathways for the students who might be undocumented, who might be on a visa, who might have DACA. And so thinking about all of these conversations too, and also just motivation of how do we keep people motivated? How do we keep, as you mentioned, asking them to continúen echando ganas and to put their best foot forward. There's unfortunately times where we are going to have those downtimes and those crisis moments.
Yeah.
And so it's like, how do we pick ourselves up? And then I appreciate how you mentioned how do we reframe our thinking to say, okay, now this happened. Now what do I do with it?
Mhm.
How do I move forward? How do I push myself? And so those were a lot of the questions that I had. And again, I want to be thankful for you coming on the podcast because I feel like we learned so much more, not only about your story and who you are and everything that you bring to this community and the United States, but also thinking about what does it mean to start your own business, to be able to have that opportunity to create your own pathway and to create your own way of engaging with different opportunities as well. Diego, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I greatly appreciate it.
Of course, it's been an honor. Thank you so much for your time. And like I said, I'm always willing to share everything through my journey because it's been a roller coaster ride, right? From being afraid of this and then sharing my story to then being on Fox News Austin, TEDx talk, and that gave me the opportunity to help other people. And I'm happy to help. And as a resource, people can email me info@diegocorzo.com, or they can follow me on Instagram, real Diego Corzo, real Diego Corzo on IG. That's basically where I share a lot of the content that I do.
And thank you for sharing that information. We're going to also put it on the show notes for all of the different Instagrams and the websites as well. I think I also put your Bigger Pockets interview and the TED Talk that you mentioned.
Cool.
Those two are also going to be on our show notes as well. So make sure people check them out as well. Again, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you on. And thank you for continuing inspiring us too.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Educators and Immigration Podcast. You can find out more information about us at www.educatorsand'immigration.com. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share our podcast with your family, friends, and colleagues. You could also leave us a review and rate us on Apple Podcasts as well as Spotify. Thank you again, and I hope you have a great day.